So Taylor, first of all, big thank you for joining us today.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
bet.
and putting together this incredible survey and all the findings. So preparing the report as well. And it would be amazing to get a quick introduction, not a quick, but an introduction from you about your journey as a designer, and then also the journey of the UX tool survey.
Yeah, you bet. It's crazy to see people who I've met online and offline joining, and I saw Ruchita just joined as well. So good to see everybody. But hey, everyone, my name's Taylor. It's awesome to be chatting with you here over lunch, my time, and whatever time it is wherever you are. So thanks for taking the time. My background is in graphic design. I have a bachelor's in graphic design, and while I was getting my degree, I had a really awesome mentor who helped me. Kind of break things in by coding up some WordPress sites and building some things that way. And I actually interned as a front-end developer building more bad WordPress sites and learned to code that way. And coming out of school, I married those coding and graphic design skills into a UX role where I learned, all about human-centered design and research and things like that. And I got started as a designer at a company called Lucid, makers of Lucid Chart, and was there for about 5 years, and just recently jumped into a new role at a startup called Neighbor that's reimagining the storage industry with more of a peer-to-peer kind of Airbnb model where you can store your stuff in a neighbor's garage instead of at a storage unit. And that's been a lot of fun, transitioning more into the consumer space from B2B and into the mobile space as well. While I was at Lucid, I was writing blog posts, and I wrote one about prototyping tools that got a lot of traction because everybody loves a blog post that says the top, 10 prototyping tools, right? And that was probably in 2016. And as I wrote that, I spun up a little website that was just like an HTML table comparing tools. And it wasn't very well designed. It had a lot of purple in it. At any rate, I kind of just threw that out into the internet and just to see what would happen. And it got picked up on Product Hunt, and like a bunch of traffic flooded to it that I wasn't really ready for and hadn't really, prepared for. And then maintained that for a little while, mostly just for fun, just because I enjoyed it and I enjoyed making something that people found valuable. And then right about that time, I started, noticing a lot of that traffic, and then tried to find ways to grow it. And I tried different methods like starting a blog or tutorials or trying to find different ways. But really, to make that list of tools valuable, I wanted to pair it with data and information somehow. And Coy Vin, who's actually, I believe, may still be with Adobe, he had done a design tool survey in like 2015. And then he went silent for a couple years. I reached out to him and never heard back from him. So if he hears this, I'd love to chat with him sometime. But at any rate, I decided that would pair really well with some of the things I was doing. And so leveraged kind of my little community and network to start creating that design tool survey. And it's just grown more and more every year. And to the point where each year, several of the design companies will actually reach out to me to make sure that like the things that I have put on there are correct and I'm representing them correctly, and that I don't do, any damage to their brand. And I take that seriously. Like I'm not, trying to deface anybody. But that's kind of where things came from and how we arrived where we are now. And so each year I've just, I know that come like August or September, I've got to start setting things up and getting ready for the end of the year. And it's just kind of become a regular part of my routine each year.
That's amazing. And 4 years, right? Like this was the fourth year?
Yeah, this is the fourth year. Yep. So I've now been able to start actually seeing some trends in things that I couldn't see in previous years. So that's been fun.
That's amazing. Okay, so thank you so much, Taylor. Again, really, really excited to have you here to chat all about the report today. So let's dive into the report. So 2020 Design Tool Survey. I think a little bit of background would help. Like, how many people did you survey? What were some of the channels that you even kind of reached out? was geography a limitation, or any specific industry that you focused on?
Yeah, we wouldn't be good UX designers if we didn't ask those questions, right?
Yeah.
Like we got to kind of gut check the population here and the sample size. This year, over 4,000 people responded, which is great, really
Mm,
exciting. And we can look through some of these demographics as well. Again, very US based, kind of English speaking based, mostly
mm,
because the survey is only in English probably. But I
mm,
have seen some of those other countries grow as well, especially in Europe, which has been cool.
mm,
So if you're in Europe, share it with your friends next year. But um, yeah, there is quite a bit of bias in this space because it's very like online and social media based, which means that
mm,
you're most likely to find and take this survey if you are someone who kind of follows those channels, right? Like
mm,
the kind of designer news, sidebar, product hunt kind of folks,
mm,
and finding reach beyond that is somewhat tricky to do organically. So this is a set of people who are kind of more active in that way. And so you have
mm,
to take that into consideration with some geography, very kind of North American based as well. So keep that in mind as you think about, maybe the age and years of experience of some of these respondents, that it
mm,
can be heavily biased that way. And that this isn't a true representation of all designers across the world, but it is a
mm,
large enough and interesting enough sample size to see trends, because I do think that there are a lot of repeat
mm,
survey respondents year over year. So we can see trends, which is helpful. But yeah, you'll notice if you keep going down a lot of these graphs about years of experience and types
mm,
of roles are really fascinating. I'm planning to do a blog post as well about the product title there. Some people call themselves UX designers, some people call themselves
mm.
product designers, and every
Yep.
year it's like neck and neck.
Mm,
So what I want to do is try and split all the results down the middle and see how they behave differently. Is it that
mm.
like there is it the company size that makes a difference? Is it the
Right.
like what they perceive that they do they user test or not, whatever it is that they're trying to describe. So that should be interesting to break down. But mostly
Mm,
this data I actually include to be helpful to the people who come and download this and use it for their own
mm,
companies and for their own
mm,
research. I do get a lot of people, I think a few thousand people have downloaded the raw results, and helping them have different ways to slice the data. I think this is helpful for
mm,
them.
mm,
You may not find too many interesting insights here, just that these are real people working at real companies. And but once you start cutting the data up, then you
yeah.
start seeing interesting insights.
That's very interesting. And yeah, absolutely hear you on the labels part or the titles part. UX designer, product designer. We did a salary survey. We had done it much earlier, but we finally finished our report, and very similar kind of patterns that we were observing too around the labels part. I think even some of the companies don't know what exactly they're hiring for, or how the labels would vary. So I, just before we kind of invited everyone into the room, we were talking about, starting with the brainstorming section
Mhm.
first, because you were sharing how that was quite interesting, the findings from last year.
Yeah. So some of you might be aware that there is a pandemic going around the world. It's in the news. You may have read about it, and that's causing a lot of people to work from home. And I think that many designers traditionally relied on this kind of step in their design process in person. I know I certainly did. Like I love whiteboards. I kind of live and die whiteboards, sticky notes. Every designer loves their like affinity map on the whiteboard. Rooms full of sticky notes so they can take pictures and put them in their portfolio. But now we can't really do that, and we're forced to handle it a different way. So you see like really, really big growth in this area, which is
Mm,
pretty exciting. I think another reason that this kind of domain brainstorming, I called it brainstorming and ideation. I think the term that's now kind of coming out of the industry is more whiteboarding tools, like
mm,
digital
mm, mm,
whiteboarding. So I'll probably update some of the language here next year. But um, if you think about how tools have grown in the last few years, it's very much been design tools trying to reach farther down the design funnel. So they're trying to like
mm,
merge with code or hand off to developers more easily or prototype. They're trying to take the UI and go down the funnel. And I think
mm,
this is interesting because it's up the funnel. It's higher up the funnel than UI is. And so
mm,
this is like tools trying to solve those earlier problems of solving the really messy prioritization problems of brainstorming, of
Mm.
collaboration, and getting people on the same page. And I
Mm.
think you'll actually start to see some of those tools who are stronger down the funnel, like Figma, like XD, like Sketch, probably reach back up and start to grab for some of these areas and domains as well by
Mm.
trying to solve some of the brainstorming and whiteboarding space. But right now, as you'll notice, lots of people doing this. We do have quite a bit of some of the respondents here on this graph on the right are saying no, they use other media, they don't use software. So maybe they're
Mm.
still in the office, maybe they just like using a notebook, maybe they have other ways to do it. But big population here of people doing it. You'll notice people are really satisfied with Whimsical, Miro, a few of those tools performing really
Yeah.
well. Whimsical, receiving the highest rating in this category. So shout out to them. They've built a really nice, really slick tool. But yeah, the biggest thing to take away here is that Miro like killed it this last year,
Right.
right, in this area. And once everybody was working from home, I think probably every company in the world, if they didn't already have one, had to scramble to find a whiteboarding tool to figure out how they were going to solve this. And it looks like quite a few people, at least in the design world, landed on Miro. I also think that we will see the emergence of many, many new tools in this space in the coming
Mm.
years,
Mm.
because we all learned, that this is viable and lots of people have switched to permanent remote work and they'll need solutions like this. So Lucid, where I worked, right as I left, they were putting out a new tool called Lucid Spark that does a lot of this too. So I kind of got to see that movement firsthand and kind of participate in it a little bit. But yeah, pretty exciting, pretty interesting space. And I think that
Mm.
we're just at the tip of the iceberg of what we could do with tools like this, because they try and
Right.
they try and mimic physical sticky notes on a canvas,
Mm.
but like
Mm.
you can't like step back and really see the whole wall or whiteboard, in a tool like this. It's kind of hard to
Yeah.
remember where things are clustered. It's hard to keep track of
Yeah.
other people. Like actually gathering things and putting sticky notes together, it's a really quick process. It slows down a little digitally. So I think you'll find a lot of innovation as people try and solve those problems that happen
Mm. Mm.
on a remote basis. And I'm interested to see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's extremely interesting. I think one of the observations that I had recently when I was trying to um, use a design tool for brainstorming with other folks was also kind of running into like licensing or those kind of issues. Like you realize generally that brainstorming or whiteboarding or ideation is one part of the process which is so cross-functional or can be highly cross-functional when you're involving people from all different teams to come in and participate in the discussion. And I realized that some of those tools, maybe that's the strategy, right, to monetize, that you do have to pay for all those folks to also come in and comment on a sticky note. But I wonder, and I that was consistent. I think I tried both Miro and Figma, and that was, or even Mural, and that was a consistent experience. I didn't try Whimsical for like a larger team exercise, and for us it was like a community exercise. So I couldn't pay for like 100 people joining in for a session. But I wonder if one of those tools takes that angle as a differentiator. I think it would be, I don't know if Matt is able to talk about anything. It would be interesting to hear, like are there similar functionalities in XD or on the roadmap that foster this kind of more whiteboarding and brainstorming?
Yeah, actually. So the Adobe International Design Team launched a plugin called Whiteboard, I think early on this year, right at the start of the pandemic. And paired with live collaboration in XD, you can actually draw, move stickies. There's a bunch of templates, and there's even a new workshop feature that takes you through a series of activities as a team. And lets you kind of do that ideation process all in XD.
Okay, that's really neat. And it's a plugin, you said, right? By the Adobe International.
Yeah, the Whiteboard plugin.
Okay.
Right on. I have had a number of conversations with people as well who are looking for good tools where you can use like an Apple Pencil to write,
Yes.
to scribble on, because the keyboard doesn't always get you there. I've had good success with InVision Freehand, mostly because it's super duper free and anybody
Yeah.
can come in as like an anonymous guest.
Yeah.
And how long that lasts, I don't know, because you got to monetize it at some point, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but that one works well. Miro has really good Apple Pencil support, and I believe they allow guests as well. Don't quote me on it, but I believe they do. And Lucid Spark also recently added their Apple Pencil support too. So if that's something you're interested in.
That's really neat. I don't know. I don't think it has a lot of, and Matt, thank you for sharing that too. I don't think it has a lot of sticky note kind of a UI, but when I bought the iPad with the pencil, I got the Moleskine app. I'm forgetting the name. Moleskine has a note taking app. Beautifully designed app. And they recently also launched a lot of collaboration features, but I think it's more for like taking sketch notes together. And before, I know we spent like 15 minutes because it's a really interesting section on this one. Were there any outliers apart from these 5? Like, I'm wondering, like back in the day, we used to use Keynote Live and like dump all the thoughts into Keynote and collaborate together. I think before Figma, or when Figma was like still quite early stage. Were there any kind of outliers in the results or tools that you heard or were curious about?
Yeah, let me actually jump into my data to see if there's anything that jumps out at me. Oh yes, definitely a big a tool that showed up in almost every category, not big enough to really surface on the graph, but that showed up almost everywhere, was Notion, which is like a really amazing like wiki / Airtable / spreadsheet / it kind of does everything. I'm a big Notion user myself, but it was interesting to see it just pop up kind of everywhere across the survey. So that, which doesn't really lend itself to like kind of sticky note freeform collaboration, but is really great for putting together lots of different content. So that was an interesting one to see.
Yeah, I'm a big and early user of Notion too. So I love that tool. It just keeps getting more and more powerful, I think, but by the day. So that's really incredible. Anyone has any comments or questions before we move on? I was just checking the chat. Or anyone has any other kind of recommendations or tools they tried on? Okay, so Taylor, which section do you wanna just go to the next section, or is there any?
Probably some more interesting thoughts on the UI design and prototyping section, which I think comes here. Obviously, no surprise here. Figma grew a lot. It's web based. It's had live collaboration from day one, so that's so they found a lot of success, obviously, this year, at least according to this sample size. Adobe XD, a lot of growth here as well, because they also have their live collaboration featured, which was great for them that they had it when COVID started. Unfortunately, Sketch didn't, but they're getting theirs kind of ramped up and ready to go. So hopefully, no matter what ecosystem you're in, you can collaborate easily with others. But this and the prototyping section saw really similar trends in that it was really noisy. Do you remember like a few years ago when there was like a new prototyping tool like literally every week, and it's like, look, we did it, we solved prototyping. And now that's all kind of settling down, and obviously there are a few big winners, which like Figma, Sketch, and XD are leading the pack there, which is great there because they're great tools. I do think that it's interesting that the prototyping space quieted down so quickly, just because I think a few of the bigger players like UXPin and Framer, they had these really like they just had a really robust feature set where you could kind of build anything you wanted to, but then they both quickly went toward this like React code-based design system sort of field, and then just like went over there and kind of started doing something new. And you can still do really robust prototyping in them, but it's a really specific market, right? Like you have to have a really specific company and tool set and development methodology to really make that work in your workflow. And so they became a lot less, I think, like universal in that way. So if you scroll down to prototyping, you'll see a lot of that. You'll see a lot of that happening here. If you keep going down to that graph, the next one, that one, where you see Figma, InVision, XD, Sketch sitting at the top. Then you have a few of the kind of tools that usually import from those UI design tools and
Right.
allow you to add an extra layer of functionality on top. Principal, Protopie, Framer, some of
Right.
those. And then lower down, you see some of those kind of code-based tools like Framer
Yeah.
and UX Pen. So it has been interesting to see the space kind of segment itself a little bit. And
Yeah.
and as Sketch and XD and Figma keep adding more and more prototyping functionality, I think tools like Principal or Marvel or Proto.io like are just gonna just become less relevant as those features show up in those other tools. It's going to be harder and harder to carve out a space for those, which is great for UI designers because now they don't have to keep importing like back and forth between tools. And I actually think if there is anything to take away from this survey each year, it's just that the tool that can consolidate steps in the workflow the most quickly and in the best way possible, like will win, you know? So if you can, like you get really good at UI design and then you pull in like code handoff. And if you can do that really well, then you pull in prototyping and you do that really well. And you kind of keep pulling downstream. So you might think like, I could see Figma or XD doing like building a user testing solution in, or building a documentation system in or something like that, right? Or if they're pulling higher up the funnel, right? User flows, sitemaps, brainstorming, and all that sort of stuff. And so the tool that can do that obviously just gobbles up more of the market and finds more and more usage. And clearly we've seen that with some of these bigger tools here. Yeah,
that's an incredible observation / analysis, especially when you reminded us of the trend that 3-4 years ago it almost became a joke. It's like, oh, another prototyping tool you're trying. I remember I was like trying to go deep into origami, and I was like, oh, Facebook has, I think it was owned by Facebook, right? Or the Facebook design team. And I was like, okay, so this must have a lot of funding, so it would be robust. So it's worth the learning curve, because there were also a lot of tools that came and you would start learning and then they disappeared and you're like, but that's really interesting. You're right that and many of these tools like InVision, started as a prototyping add-on to Sketch, and then you would use Zeppelin for handoff. And I think Figma definitely, pushed everyone, like pushed the bar up a little high in terms of having a lot of those features kind of integrated within the same tool.
Right.
So that's really interesting.
Zeppelin, Zeppelin got pretty big as a great solution for Sketch, and actually is still doing pretty well for themselves, despite Sketch coming out with Sketch Cloud and kind of solving a lot of those problems themselves. But I guess teams that are already deeply embedded in Zeppelin just kept it around, and force of habit, harder to switch out of a tool, but they're still around. Yeah,
this is really interesting. And again, anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to chime in. I was just gonna, I'm seeing how most of these tools, as you rightfully, pointed out, are trying to aim for having all these features integrated, within their ecosystem. A little bit in form of plugins, was mostly as native functionalities. I just fear that it kind of leads to a similar path where then all those tools, that's where we started from, that all those tools these tools are so bloated. I just want to do this one thing. So I'm going to go for, this really lean, fast tool. And then we kind of come full circle. But of course, cloud changes a lot of things, and a lot of the collaboration features being right on top of mind. I think that also changes. It's like a big contextual difference.
Yeah, I think the cloud really does make a big difference. I think the web has come a long way, especially now the ability to wrap websites within something like Electron or something to make it into a desktop app. And some apps can be really bloated and kind of clunky, and others seem to do it right and keep the performance. But it does seem to offer a lot of advantages, especially when you can go cross-platform. You can access it from your computer at home, your computer at work. Like there are a lot of advantages that way. So yeah, I completely agree.
Someone was, I think, chiming in.
I was just going to say, I just graduated last month from a boot camp at General Assembly, and the New York City instructional team actually made the decision late in 2020 to switch the instructional platform from Sketch to Figma.
Okay.
Because Figma's making such progress in the market, and because that prototyping tool is built right in. And when I applied and got accepted to the program, it was like, okay, we're going to learn Sketch. You know, Sketch is our tool of choice. Maybe get some time on it. And then I showed up for class, and they said, we're in Figma now.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that, David. I also, and again, I don't know if I'm sure, like you would, Taylor, you would have it in your kind of the actual data set. If Sketches still holds, you know, kind of more following in Europe for it being, you know, like a Dutch company. Last time I remember, but it's been a year almost when I went to one of the design meetups in Amsterdam, and most of the people I spoke with, they were like, many of them had not even heard of Figma. But again, you know, it's kind of because it's almost like a local in EU. I think the company and the brand affinity was still strong.
Yeah, and you know, like I'm currently a Figma user. Sketch still holds like this special place in my heart for like liberating me from Illustrator, you know? They showed us what design tools could be, and like look what they've done to the market now, right? They've just like totally blown it open so that like UI designers now have this really great competitive market of tools, and everybody benefits from competition. There's a lot to be said for like brand loyalty, right? There's a lot to do with that.
That's very true. That's very true. I still, and this is not to, not saying because Matt is on the call too, but I remember checking some of XD's prototyping features and at an event in Toronto about one and a half years ago. And that time, I think, or 2 years ago, that time when the audio, you know, voice prototyping and all those things were still new. And I was blown away at that, like 2 years ago, by some of the motion kind of fidelity of the prototyping and motion design within XD and the voice stuff. And I was like, why is Adobe not talking more about some of these features? Like, they were really powerful features, but not much talked about. And I still have to go into Illustrator or Photoshop for quite a few things when you're working on a product or project. So I wonder how deep those integrations, once, I know last year Adobe pushed so much work out. If you look at just 2020 and the amount of work with Creative Cloud and things that got pushed out, that was not my expectation from such a massive company. So it'll be curious to see, you know, the next 2 years or so, if, you know, XD with still the massive company backing behind it is like how it gives the competition to especially Figma, I would say, that being the biggest. Yeah,
I agree. I think XD has grown. I'm saying somewhat quietly, almost just like reaching feature parity really quickly with all these other tools, and they have that really solid Adobe foundation, you know, where you have so many designers and people with a Creative Cloud license that can easily jump into XD, and you can tie a lot of those tools together. So obviously XD has a lot going for it, and you know, if you're already in a program or a company or something that uses Creative Cloud, to be able to really quickly leverage that and get up and running is a huge advantage. So there's a lot of good stuff happening there. And you're right, they do have like voice prototyping. They also have like gamepad support. A lot of a lot of just things that really specific, you know, industries might need that you don't find in other tools generally. So yeah, nice job to the XD team.
That's amazing. Rachel has a question. Are there any tools that allow for prototypes where users can enter text, type in a text field, you know, rather than just hover and click interactions?
There are. And in fact, so that's mostly what I do with UX tools. If you go to uxtools.co/tools, I'll actually drop that link into
I'll open it right now
into the chat.
Tools.co/tools.
.co. Yep, you typed XO.
Oh.
There you go. And if you go to the prototyping tab.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so this is what I spend most
quite
of my
robust.
time doing on UX tools. So there's prototyping. You'll want to go to the prototyping tab though on the top in the blue. You're on the design tab right now. There's a prototyping tab. And then there's a column, if you scroll over to the right, called
inputs.
Yep. So we can sort by that. And those are tools that allow you to actually type into it and use like variables and things like that. And some of them will allow you to use the text as like logic. So yeah, there's something to reference if you need a prototyping tool that does that.
Wow, that's incredible, Taylor. So moving the topic of the talk, I'm kidding.
So this is where it all started, right? Like I had this little table, and then the design tool survey came later, and so now the design tool survey probably gets a lot more attention than this table does, but it's still interesting to maintain, still helpful.
This is really, I find it incredibly helpful, especially for folks that are constantly trying to, learn new skills or push the boundaries a little, and you're not afraid of learning new tools. I think this is incredible. And yeah, Xure, I still remember about, and I think Ryan also pointed out, like Xure is one of the tools that has this power. I was trying to prototype for a kind of a very complex Boolean search interface. For one of our medical research companies, like 3-4 years ago, and Xure at that time seemed like the only choice, but the UI and UX of the tool itself was so brutal that I think I gave up midway of just learning it. But it was incredibly powerful, and
that's what I've heard. Like I think you find Xure in a lot of like big kind of well-established like enterprise companies, right? And that have probably been using it for a while. And it has a lot of really crazy functionality in it, like just layers and layers and layers of really deep functionality. Not the most beautiful experience, not the most kind of seamless design, but really powerful, especially when it comes to like documentation and producing like requirements docs and all sorts of things that a lot of these other tools haven't even begun to think about. So like a lot of really rich content there for sure.
Amazing. Okay, I think maybe we have time for one more section, and then we can do some more discussions, Q&A. And also, before we move on, does anyone have any questions or any comments so far on this incredible information and data that Taylor has been sharing? Anyone? Okay, we'll save the discussions for the end.
Maybe for the final one, at the very bottom, there's a section called Exciting Tools for 2021.
Oh.
And this is always fun to dig into. It's past there. It is right there. This one's always fun to dig into because it's just completely open-ended response, right? Like anybody can type anything they want. So you always get all sorts of quirky stuff in here. People typing goofy, nefarious things into it as well. If you want to go read those, you can download the data. But you just catch lots of really interesting things in here. One thing I think that was interesting this year is a few 3D tools made it in. And like kind of made it into the top 15 or 20 here. Yeah, you've got like Blender and Cinema 4D and some of those, which is really fascinating considering who the demographic is here, right? So like seeing this little bump in interest in 3D tools, I think that can be for a number of reasons. I think, as somebody mentioned in the Slack thread, like AR and VR and things like that are continuing to grow, and designers will need to be able to produce some of those assets to keep up with that. I also think that the dribble illustration trend of like big gangly people is now kind of moving to like 3D Gumby people, and so probably lots of designers want to brush up their dribble portfolio with their 3D illustrations. But it is always interesting to dig in here and see. There's also a lot of interest in Webflow. I know they just did a big raise. They got a bunch of money, so they're doing well. There's Notion again, just kind of quietly along in the list. So this one's always fun to look into.
That's so interesting. I'm just amazed that so many people have mentioned Figma as like the tool to try in 2021. I would assume that a lot of people are already, kind of on the bandwagon. So that's like Figma and Sketch having the first two spots is intriguing.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to go in and see who actually said that they're already using Figma and then who answered Figma for this. Cut those people out. Maybe they're just like fanboys and girls who are just polluting the numbers here.
Yeah. What about folks on the call? Like, I'd love to hear. What tools are you most excited to try? Not the ones you're already using. That would be really interesting to hear.
I've picked up and put down Webflow several times over 2020, and it was mostly like every time I picked it up, I was like, this is just like a little too fiddly for me to really want to spend like the time to get good at this. But my like commitment to myself for 2021 is, all right, get over yourself, get proficient in Webflow. It's a useful tool.
That's amazing. I totally hear you. I think I've had very similar experience with Webflow. Every time I've tried it, it reminded me a little bit of Dreamweaver, like the UI, in some places. And then I went back to WordPress because I was like, my comfort zone. Anyone else on the call that's been toying with Webflow but still is struggling to kind of get beyond the fence?
I see some in the chat. Some people are mentioning Framer. Somebody wants to dive into bubble.io. One of my friends actually created an entire app in Bubble, and I was blown away that someone would figure out how to do that and then take the time to actually do that. So it's pretty impressive that that's a possibility.
Oh, Wiki, totally hear you. And that was one of the reasons, like as the host, I don't want to kind of put my opinion strongly, but I was like, when Josh shared that, like that's been kind of my experience too. Like Webflow has not been as easy. Like I saw the advertisements, and even the, when I saw right now when they raised the funding, I was reading the article about Webflow Enterprise being launched, and it was like, take ownership back of your website, and you don't have to get stuck with agencies or developers. But it's not as super, like if you are familiar with code, a little bit of CSS, how classes work, all those things, yes, then you get it. And I did put my time on Dreamweaver early on, so I understood a little bit of the structure, not the CMS part, but it's still not as easy as, just drag, drop, and build your website. So I totally hear you, but maybe that's where they're reaching. That's where they're going, so not to be too critical, but maybe that is the vision.
They do have one of the best kind of visual representations of CSS layout that I've ever seen. Like CSS layout is a crazy dumpster fire of like properties and classes and things, but they've done a really good job of like letting you harness Flexbox and stuff, even though you may not even know that you're using Flexbox, but they're giving you all the properties and surfacing it into a pretty interesting UI, and seem to be doing really well. But yeah, I felt comfortable messing around with it because I understood everything going on under the hood. And I was like, I see what they're trying to get me to do here. But if I didn't understand that, I imagine that it would take me quite a while to try and make a responsive website work the way I would want it to. Yeah.
So true. I think, coming from visual design tools, then you're like, wait, I can't just drag drop and it's done.
Right.
Which a lot of WordPress builders, that's the direction they've gone in. And it is like, once you cross the, a little bit of learning curve, they are literally like, you would be designing in XD, Sketch, or Figma, and you're just moving layouts apart, and it does get pretty easy to work with.
A really cool tool that I found that did that really well it's called studio.design is the website. And I don't know if they ever really gained much traction. I haven't heard much from them in the past few years, but they had a pretty amazing UI where everything actually was working in like a CSS flow format, so that like, you type more text and it pushes the content down beneath it and stuff. And every layout box had a margin and a padding that you could just click and drag to make it bigger or smaller. And you could lay out grids and things. Like I think they really got the UI right. They did some really great things.
Oh.
And so it's kind of similar to Webflow in that way. See how like you just drag that and push the margin, you know, like they showed there. Pretty neat stuff. But I don't know if the tool ever went anywhere. I don't know if it's actually worth investing into that heavily. But pretty neat, pretty innovative.
Yeah, the mockups actually do look promising. That's really cool. That's really, really interesting. I think anyone try these tools? Yeah, Heyman is asking if there are any good tools that you know of where you kind of share your design tool and it gets you extract the code from it, which I know like CSS stuff you get it from Figma and Zeppelin and a few others. But do you know of any other tools?
As far as like programmatically producing it, I know Anima was bundled in with Sketch a couple years ago. I think they had a tool called Launchpad, and it was supposed to do a lot of that. And I actually saw people spin up some little websites from it. There was a really cool tool called Macaw that did this well, but then got purchased by InVision and kind of gobbled up. And I think they joined the InVision Studio team.
Right.
To be honest, my personal opinion on that is that usually the code that gets produced, unless you're kind of using it for prototyping purposes or like trying to spin up a quick web page for testing or something, the code that gets produced is usually almost unusable or unreadable by a developer, because it's just so like it's just way too programmatic, and it's just not the way a human would produce it, and kind of difficult to deconstruct. So they're kind of tricky in that way. I haven't heard of Spline though, so I'm interested to see what this is.
Yeah, I think Ryan was, and then like completely agree with you on the kind of the extracting the code part or having like production ready code from our designs. I think Ryan was referring to the 3D conversation that we were having, and yeah, I do remember checking out Spline. I really love the tool, the design of the landing page when I last checked it. It looks quite neat. 3D for web in the real time. I think also like as computing power in the cloud, all those things are increasing so fast. It's incredible to like 3D got such a big. At least you saw it way more in 2020 than before. Ryan, have you tried Spline? Ryan is saying really want to try.
No, I haven't. I really want to try. Like I see some people try on Twitter and it's like super easy to just quickly do something.
A very similar tool to this that I have tried is called Vectory.
Yes.
And it like it's kind of like they're kind of doing for 3D what Sketch did for UX or for UI design. And it's like a really simple interface where you just pull in models, and then you have to know some basic 3D modeling techniques, but you can cut out and model and do all those things. And it looks like Spline is doing something similar, and I'm actually going to look into that after this call. But I am really interested in companies that are able to take these previously very complex apps and tools and make them into something really simple for people to produce nice looking content. And I was able to pretty quickly, probably within a couple hours, make like a nicely rendered Vectory output here in Vectory by just like following some YouTube tutorials, which I promise you I would not have been able to do in like Blender or Cinema 4D or something. But I am still waiting for the tool that comes along and does that for After Effects. If anybody knows of a really simple motion graphics tool where I don't have to understand like rotoscoping and all of that stuff, like send it my way, because I would love to use it.
I can't remember the name, but I do remember reaching out to the founder. So anyways, talking about it would be useless, but Rachel is saying she also can't remember the name, but I'll dig out my email and I'll share it in our channel on DesignX. And their claim, like the landing page was exactly what you're saying. It was like Figma for motion design. Like it doesn't have to be so messy, so hard.
Was it Haiku?
No, but Haiku is really cool too. This was like, I think they just had the landing page. They just have announcement for beta, and they had some mockups and everything. But Haiku is out there, right? Haiku you can use. I think Haiku Animator. And I've tried it.
But a lot of these companies are trying to solve UI motion, not just like motion in general, like graphical motion, right?
Yes. That one was graphical. The one I was talking about, like that was literally like After Effects. Like you could do a lot. Yeah. Matt, do you have any confidential information you can share about if there are any big changes on After Effects coming?
I have no idea what's happening on After Effects.
Okay. Putting you on the spot.
I know XD came from like a little internal team at Adobe. You need to form a group of people who can do what XD did for Illustrator. They need to do that for After Effects.
I think,
and I will pay
so
for
what
it.
I can say, there's more focus on prototyping coming, I think. So I don't know. XD is not just an Illustrator replacement. I'll say that.
Right.
You can extrapolate from there. Yeah.
Okay, we are almost at the. I know Taylor asked for 45 minutes.
That's okay.
The conversations were really engaging, so I think we took up your entire lunch hour.
As you can imagine, I can talk about tools for a while. So.
Yeah. Do we have any questions, comments, or why don't we? Let me see if a few people have their screen switched off. But for those of you who haven't, Rachel, Josh, David, and Matt, would be really interesting to hear what would be the craziest kind of feature request or tool request that you would have if you could. What would you like to see in a tool that's just totally non-existent across all the tools you see today? Who wants to go first?
I guess my dreams aren't that wild. I can't even think of something crazy to ask for.
There must be something, Rachel.
Unmoderated usability testing with analytics right in the design tool.
I mean, they definitely have tools that do that separately from design tools.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Maze. Maze had a really great year as well. But if you could just like put Maze into XD or into Figma, then like that's the dream right there.
Yeah. Wiki is sharing in chat, automate everything to be accessible. But yeah,
nice.
That would be amazing. If they could be almost like automatic checks on accessibility and even recommendations. Like the tools could be definitely more smarter on guiding the designer a little bit.
So Ruchita said paper sketch to wireframe converter. And I've seen people mess around with stuff like this before.
Yeah.
And I know we're getting a lot of really interesting AI tools that can programmatically generate images from text and stuff. Like you can say a dog catching a frisbee, and it'll like just create that out of nowhere. And so like you can imagine saying like an interface that has a top tab bar and a bottom nav and blah blah blah, and it can like make all that stuff. So I don't think we're super far away from take a photo of a sketch, make it into something.
The Airbnb team has done a lot in that space.
I remember watching those videos. Ruchita saying there's a Figma add-on too, and I think Matt said Adobe Capture can also help with that. Josh, any crazy tool request, feature request ideas?
This one's just like top of mind because I am like working on kind of revamping our design system right now. I would love a tool that just like scrubbed every design file in like a team Figma and looked for every single component that wasn't in the design system and then just surfaced all of those to me so I could determine like, all right, here are the components that we have straggling out there in space that I don't have to go chase down anymore. That would just be super, super useful. If somebody makes that plugin.
Yeah. I think I absolutely agree with you. I think this whole space, and I don't know, Taylor, if you've looked into this whole space of like, what do you call like hygiene, around your files, around your design systems, even as simple as naming. Like sometimes I'm like, why do I have to even start from scratch to think of the layer? Like, why can't you, you see how I've named the other layers.
+1 to that. My Figma files are so disorganized. If there was some tool that helped me like you know, define a system and then only create frames and pages in line with that system.
Yeah.
Rachel showing her true colors over here.
Yeah.
No, I have, there has been, I want to say, didn't Figma announce or say that they were going to do something around like, what do they call it? UI assistance or something like that. And I think they were leaning towards some sort of enterprise feature where it would actually scrape all the files on your team and tell you if there were like how many symbols had been detached from the original symbol or something, and how often symbols were being used and stuff. It's supposed to be a way to try and help you curate that. But that's like a very, very small piece of what we're mentioning here. Like, I think hygiene is really fascinating, especially if it could point out accessibility and like, oh, you designed this thing, that's not actually going to be possible in Swift because of this constraint. So you should probably change your design because you don't know what you're doing. Things like that.
I'd be curious to see if Stark doesn't make like a huge move toward cooperating with Figma like over the next year to say like, hey, here's all these accessibility tools that we're working on. Like, let's.
Yeah, on the accessibility side, I agree. That could be really, really big for them. And yeah, the hygiene part, Taylor, so true. I think there are so many use cases, and you know, even the marketing team doesn't go in, you know, just pick a crazy font and you're like, this is not in our library. Any marketing designers? I'm not trying to judge anyone. It's just from personal experiences. I've struggled with that.
I've had some pretty interesting conversations though with some folks from Envision as well as Abstract, if you're familiar with them. They do like versioning and design system stuff. But I know that they're very actively looking into these new domains, right? Like trying to figure out what kind of the next generation of design tools is and kind of where design tools are going. So I think we'll see some pretty cool stuff in the next couple of years come out of that.
That's so true. Cool. Really excited and amazing that we have quite some exciting ideas. And Matt, if we see these features being launched in Adobe soon, then you know we expect our name to show up when the screen loads. You know, you would see those. I would read the first I would read the first 3 names, and you know, then it's like I wanted to read all every other word. But jokes apart, Taylor, thank you so much. This was really fun. I really liked our topic, and also you did such an incredible job. You know, not just with the survey, but that whole UX tools library that you've built or database. Incredible. So a massive, massive kudos and applause for you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the thoughts. I really liked all the ideas. I think some of the companies said we could form like a consulting group and they could come ask us what good tools are and we could tell them, and then they would give us money and then we would be rich.
That's an incredible plan, and I think we should definitely work on that.
You float that some way, Matt. You let Andrew and the team know over there. About that.
I'll see if I can get in touch with Koi for you.
Yeah.
There you go.
Thanks, Taylor.
Cool. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone.
Thanks,
and we will. I'll see you on DesignX. Chat soon. Bye.